Good afternoon. Good afternoon. There we go. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us, and thanks very much to the Chamber Foundation and all of the partners here. My name is Josh Barnes. I have the privilege and the honor of serving as the Deputy Associate Administrator at the U.S. Small Business Administration for our Office of Disaster Assistance, which, if you say it all in one breath, you may get a little lightheaded. So I'm glad I'm still upright. We have a really exciting panel today. We have a lot of really great experience here before us. One of the things that we have wanted to try to talk about and try to really get down to the nuts and bolts of is asking the question of, are we there yet? It's the 11th year, right? And it is the question of, what does it take to help broker good public-private partnerships? What does it take to get recovered from a major disaster? What does it take to even be resilient? And these are definitional questions that I know that this conference has been asking for the last 11 years. So just for kicks, I want to, I'll introduce the panel here in a moment. I've got some data points. So there is a state who will go unnamed, but I'll give you a clue. It starts with an L and ends in Louisiana. And since the inception of this conference, they have had over 47,000 people, 47,000 houses and businesses have come to the U.S. Small Business Administration for disaster assistance more than once. They're repeat customers. So in just 11 years, they have had multiple disasters, and that if you assume a four-person household, that's just shy of 200,000 people. That's not insignificant. Of those 47,000, there are about 13 zip codes that have 750 properties that have been affected, and in 5 of those 13, 20% of the population has no transportation, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. So when we're talking about resilience, when we're talking about recovery, I beg the question, are we there yet? And how are we going to get there? Because I don't think we're done yet, to be honest. I think there's a lot of work that yet needs to be done. I think we need to do more to meet people where they're at. It's a lot of what we need to do with not just diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that's a major part of what our focus is, but recognizing that just because an agency puts, and I can say this, right? So I'm from an agency. Just because an agency puts something on their website does not mean it's been delivered. It's been put on the website. Congratulations. What matters is getting connections and getting relationships and getting people that can help communicate the business case and the relevance for why someone should even care, why this is an option. And when thinking about the next disaster, I can't help but think that there's more we can do, and our panelists will be able to share some of their experience about this. There's a narrow window of opportunity where, especially for small businesses, having the chance to impress upon them and interject and be part of the discussion about how they can themselves be more resilient. And I'm looking in the room and I recognize a lot of faces of folks who probably could just easily sit on one of these panels themselves. They're experts in this field. These are things that matter to you. And so you probably are somewhat familiar if I were to say that when we're talking about business continuity planning and sustainability planning for small businesses, most of the tools and the templates start with the wonkiness of our profession. You should have a business impact analysis that is conducted to identify your critical mission essential function. Like, you're talking to a pizza shop owner. They go, I make pizzas. I don't even know what language you're using. But that pizza shop owner is probably, an anchor of that part of the community. So we need to find ways to reach them in ways that are relevant. So joining me on my left, we have Joel Thomas, who his bio is in the app, so I encourage you to read it in depth. But Joel has an immense amount of experience in working as a small business, as in the academic sphere, in the research sphere, in the public-private partnership sphere, you name it. Joel seems to have touched on it. And then we also have Pam Long, who is joining us from, it was referenced earlier in the day, from Howard County, Maryland, specifically Ellicott City, which had experienced 2 major flooding events, and she has been a bastion of resilience and recovery and leadership in that community. And so I'm just absolutely delighted that both of you have decided to join us today. Want to make sure I stop talking, so I'll close the book, and really ask Joel if you can start us off and share some of your experience, what works, what doesn't work, how do we connect the dots?
Absolutely. First, thank you to the Chamber of Commerce Foundation for the opportunity to come back and speak again with this illustrious panel. First, before I introduce myself, how many of you have ever owned a small business? Raise your hand. A lot of you. I love it. That's great. So I'm Joel Thomas, founder and CEO of Spin Global. We're a public benefit company with a mission to disrupt disasters from neighborhoods to nations. And we're doing that in cities around the world, also at the national level, advising on developing national level frameworks for engaging the private sector more deliberately before, during, and after disasters. In addition, I actually have been a co-owner and founder of a small business restaurant group. There's a tech-enabled craft beer and wine restaurant group that we had 10 restaurants that got stood up around the country from East Coast to West Coast, and have experienced the loss of a business due to a flood. Have experienced the loss of a business due to COVID. I've also experienced successful cooperation, collaboration, pivoting, merger and acquisition, and selling and making an exit from those companies as well. I have, as mentioned, I teach a graduate level course at the Tulane School of Social Work, the Disaster Resilience Leadership Academy. I teach on the economics of disaster recovery, so certainly we'll bring some perspectives there as well. So, as we look at, the landscape, I think when we talk about risk reduction and resilience, I think it's important to start with small business. The world of starting a small business is an inherently risky business, right? 75% don't ever make it to 15 years. So when you talk about longevity, we're talking about a segment of society that is by nature risky. And I think it's important to draw paradigms and characteristics to understand sort of the landscape in the U.S. as opposed to some other countries. The average age of a business in the United States is much shorter than in some countries in the world. Did you know there's 1,000 businesses in the world that have been around since the year 1700? Astonishingly, 53% of them are in Japan. So there are pros and cons to economies where there's an old age of business. There's disadvantages. For example, we saw this in Puerto Rico, where the average age of business was 20 years after Hurricane Maria. This type of economy creates barriers for entry. There's reasons why. There's not a rapid startup economy. There's not new investment. There's regulatory and financial hurdles to sort of starting up. In America, we have the opportunity to have low regulatory environment, access to capital through all sorts of means. So we've got lots of startups. We heard from the SBA earlier today. I forget, it was 8 million last year that started up. On average, it's like 3 million a year. But it's also important to understand this. Almost 2 million a year on average, 5-year averages from Dun & Bradstreet just today published, 1.8 million businesses died on average over the last 5 years, and take that for what it's worth. And when we look at disaster and the impacts of disasters on small businesses, we've heard the statistic about 40% die after disaster. We actually did some research with D&B, and they developed this hurricane vulnerability index, only looking at hurricanes, but literally every hurricane for the last 10 years on the coast, look at all the businesses that existed and all those that didn't exist after hurricanes. And the number is actually about 12%. When you take into account the churn, also business ownership structures, there's holding companies and whatnot, and looking at people who recreate their businesses, the number is actually about 12% that don't ever reemerge. And so there are losses, but as we have better data and better technology, we're able to have more targeted and precise insights. So I provide some of those thoughts to say, I think we need to have a longer term perspective, and I think we need to mainstream this idea of business resilience. In American culture, business culture, it's build a company, 3 to 5 years, exit, right? That's sort of the prevailing culture, and that's a good thing. But the flip side is a very short-term, finite, ends justifies the means mentality, and that's got to change. We need to look at systemic ways, and I've got a number of recommendations I'll provide later on what we can do about it. But I think we need to take some lessons from Japan, where they've got, and they have their own struggles, but they're also, been a strong economy for a long time, where they're thinking about business in decades and hundreds of years. I actually met with a Japanese business owner. He's like, we're building an 800-year business plan. I'm like, what? 800-year business plan? Are you kidding me? I mean, that's so foreign, capital F, to an American small business owner. So with that, I'll pause. I'll save additional discourse and recommendations and stories for later. But with that, I'll turn it over to my...
There goes that question. What do you want to do in 5 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
100 years.
Dan, would you share some of your experience and background and just tell us more about you and what you've been doing?
Absolutely. I'm a photographer. I've had my business for 15 years in Howard County. In the last 10 years, I've been in the historic district of Ellicott City. Storyteller by nature. My job is to go out there for corporations and businesses and help visually sell your service, your business, by providing branding photos, headshots. I get to work with families and create fun and beautiful portraits of their family, and we capture a glimpse of your son or daughter's high school senior life. That's what I do to make an income. Like I said, I've been in Main Street for 10 years. In 2016, the devastating and deadly flood. I told the women at the table, I'm okay. If you say something bad to me, I'm not going to cry, but I get emotional when I think of all the help that people have given us. How many of you, when somebody needs help, whether it's a donation or sending a check for a donation or giving a hand, you're the first one to help? Then when you're the one who needs help, you're like, no, it's okay. So I talk about the flood, and I automatically get emotional because there was such an outreach in the community. It wasn't just our community. It was around the world. People gave help, and the waters came tumbling down the several blocks. Cars ran into the storefronts. Inventory, people's life savings, and their livelihood rushed out the windows. And it was horrific to see. There's still visuals. I'm sure you all saw videos and newsreels from that. But then I became a storyteller of our town because I did see this outreach of people helping us. And it was the first time that I had been there that this had happened. And our county executive, who was in office at that time, had the foresight when he started. There was a flood in 2012. It was bad, but it wasn't as devastating. And he had started a flood work group. So he was being proactive. And when Jen was talking earlier, as far as being proactive and what do you need to help prevent something, and then how do you mitigate? It's the same type of thing, when there's a natural disaster. And we see these hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, mass shootings. There's so many disasters out there, and you hate to think something is going to happen to you, but it's one of those things where you need to expect the best but prepare for the worst. And thankfully, he had the foresight to start this flood work group, so when it did happen, they had a good jump start. so many people, like I said, were reaching out and helping with donations because of relationships that all the business owners had formed and our county executive, our county government had formed. And just the charming town, people loved it. Almost $2 million were donated. And a lot of cleaning supplies. And we had 4,000 people sign up to volunteer to help clean, to help clean. And we're talking, it's summer, it's 120 degrees inside the buildings. People are in there, long sleeves, pants, masks before masks were cool, mucking out. And that is tremendous. And you had to be credentialed. And we had chain link fence surrounding our community because you had to go in there for certain hours. And I was so touched by people helping. I thought I need to start going live and putting a face on Elegant City. It's just not the charming and historic landscape and the buildings. It's the people who really make that town come to life. So I started doing live streams to show people and introduce people around town. Within 3 months, the street had reopened to traffic, and we were running like crazy to try to make up the losses. We met a lot of people from SBA. It's one of those things where, and if we have time, I'd love to talk about some of the solutions, but you're kind of bombarded with information overload and the email box, and you're flagging, okay, I don't need that now, I'll flag it, and then by then more information's coming in, more information, and visually, one of our parking lots was full of tents, and these are agencies who are there to help us and help guide us, but you're on so much, as business owners, we wear so many hats anyway. And then when something like this happens, you're still wearing those hats and trying to figure out how you're going to provide for your family. And there are these people who want to come help you. And like, where do I start? So I would love to see if we could come up with some kind of hub where it's all information in one site. But to get back to the story. So we're back up and running. It takes a long time. I'm in the service business, obviously professional photographer. I can't photograph 10 headshots at the same time. So to make up the income, it took 13 months the first go around to make up my losses. 22 months later, the 1 in 1,000 year flood came back and hit us again. And it was devastating the first time. But the second time, like, this wasn't supposed to happen again in my lifetime. Then you're back at it. The good thing is we've been through it, so unfortunately we had practice and we knew what to do, and things were expedited a little more quickly. 22 months after that, COVID, and you're told you have to shut down because they're non-essential. So within 4 years, many of us were closed down 3 times with lost income, and that's where it's great, where you have like-minded people to help assist you and guide you. You're resilient. You have to be resilient. I don't have time to figure out if I'm going to do it. I'm going to spend my energy and resources how I'm going to do it. I'm a single mother of 2 teenage daughters. I'm going to do it. How do we do it? Who's there to help? And it's the leaning on other people and allowing somebody to help that sometimes is a challenge.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing the depth of just the significance of that experience. There's a lot of academic research out there about disaster recovery, and this has been my career, and I spend a lot of, I've had the privilege and the honor of working with over 43 different states in supporting their disaster recovery efforts. So I'm one of those 10 people that you mentioned, and one of the frustrating things that I've seen is that there is the information overload, that there's an emotional overload, that there was a tornado that I had the opportunity to support, and we were delivering sandwiches, or it was actually cheeseburgers and hot dogs, I think. And we offer it to this woman who is in what's left of her home. There's nothing left, and she's trying to pick up the pieces, and that's hard in and of itself. And she says, yeah, sure, I'll take a sandwich, and then she reaches behind herself, and then starts weeping. And we say, are are you okay? She says, that's where my fridge was. I was just trying to get some ketchup. Do you have any ketchup? And it's something which I think we can't forget when we're talking about connecting the dots on this, is that there is a deeply personal element, deeply human element to recovery and resilience. And I think that, to the extent that you all can share some of your ideas about how we can help close that gap, I would certainly love to hear it. So Joel, you would kind of gave a teaser that you had some ideas. So why don't you share some of those?
Yeah, I'll start with a reflection, and I'll get to one of my recommendations. In the early days of our COVID response in the U.S., actually it was like March 15th or something, I wrote an article, and I actually talked about it here at the conference 2 years ago. There was this phrase, flattening the curve, everybody's talking about, and they're talking about the healthcare systems, not putting pressure on that. I wrote an article at the time about flattening the small business curve, because I anticipated that if we shut down the ability for American small businesses to function entirely, that it would have catastrophic results. And so the idea wasn't to just let it go footloose and fancy free, but hey, I'll let folks be responsible, protect their people, protect their customers, like we're doing now and like we've been doing for a couple of years, but do that much sooner. To me, I hope as we look back at this pandemic and this response, that we are far more supportive of small businesses and their needs, because shutting down for a month, shutting down for a week, in some cases, literally restaurant industry, already a high-risk industry, week to week, month to month, folks. And, I've got family is involved. I have a cousin who, rheumatoid arthritis, felony. His only chance at labor, frankly, was running this bar. And that was gone because he was unable to operate that location. And so, and frankly, he's struggling to this day. So there's real people. When we talk about businesses, it's not just an LLC, it's not just an S corp. There's a person, there's a family behind that, and there are families behind that. I've created hundreds of jobs through those companies, and unfortunately, a bunch of those we had to say goodbye to. And it didn't have to happen that way. I think I hope we can learn that there's a measured approach, that it's not health or economy, it's health and economy. It's a 1-2 punch, right? And so I think, like, when I look at it, we need to be far more thoughtful about when we look at disaster management, and we're looking at big muscle groups and what big movements can we make, and it seemed like it was a very reactionary thing. Having a more nuanced approach, and I think we need to update our playbooks. We need to update our planning assumptions. We need to think differently about how to engage small businesses in the solutioning, right? So, for example, in New Orleans, they shut down a lot of businesses, but there was government grants, and they were used to actually help keep businesses open. And those businesses were able to deliver door to door to vulnerable populations, including the elderly, right? So they actually engaged. So one of my key recommendations is thinking through not just SBA does a great job at individual assistance. Some of the businesses I've been part of been beneficiaries of the PPP and EIDL. Thank you very much. But the individual one-to-one, it's too overwhelming for the average jurisdiction to manage. There's 30 million businesses in this country, folks. There's no friggin' way you're going to have enough people in government to coordinate and touch them all. So how do we take an ecosystems-based approach, thinking through the design in advance about different scenarios and situations, and actually anticipating shortfalls and needs, and engaging private sector, small businesses, NGOs in the process of actually solving for the problems that we have, as opposed to having the knee-jerk, for I imagine a lot of folks in this city, an inherently governmental solution. What would it look like to have an inherently private sector-led solution? We talk about it, building private-public partnerships. FEMA put out guidance a year ago about building private-public partnerships for the first time. We're mentally, it was said earlier, we've made a lot of strides towards resilience and all this. I think we're mentally doing that, but frankly, are we there yet? No friggin' way. We've got a long way to go, and we have to recalibrate. And I think we start by looking at, what is the center of economic activity? Where's the center of gravity in your community? They should be involved in the planning process. They should be part of your core planning team. They should be part of leading, not just participating in an exercise led by government, but leading, co-leading those efforts. Or government agencies show up to their house and go on their turf. It's different when you ever have somebody over to dinner at your home. You ever go to their home? It's different whose turf you're on, right? So how do we extract this basic human lesson and apply it at a PPP level? And I think it's, engagement is absolutely critical. I think we need to up the game with engagement, and one-to-one is necessary. It's all context of relationships, but it's impractical in terms of actually being able to include the whole community. We talk about whole community, whole this, whole that. It's not happening unless we're being strategic about the platforms we're using local chambers, for example. We're here at the National Chamber, using local chambers, other local platforms for engagement, and then developing battle rhythms and processes for engagement. Actually, another main point I would make is that Mami Misatori, who's the head of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, spoke here a couple years ago. And she said that, look, the last generation's challenge was the life-saving mission. And she said, haven't we come a long way? We aren't perfect, but we've improved our alert and warning systems, internationally, I'm speaking. We've improved search and rescue internationally. She said the challenge of this generation is to mitigate the economic losses of disasters. And we heard from Dr. Graham earlier today about the exponential number of billion-dollar disasters that are happening every year. The way we mitigate economic losses is not doing what we're doing right now. I think we need to be deliberate in our planning and design, linking economic development and disaster management strategies at national levels, at local levels, looking at disaster dollars that come in as an opportunity for economic development and robust development, building a climate that fosters business resilience as well. So I'll leave you with that for now. I've got a few more thoughts later on.
Thanks, Joel. Pam?
I want to jump on. Thank you, Joel. I just want to say ditto there. The Economic Development Authority in our county played a big part. It was kind of unique. It started with a snowstorm prior to 16, and the county called on them to help. A big roof caved in and help them place employees somewhere else. So that's how they kind of got their feet in there. So then when the flood happened, they were right there to help with so many different things. And they were more of the boots on the ground, because we do need to look at the small businesses and the large corporations and how can we best help mitigate, so when it does happen again, and hopefully it won't, but it could, what can be done then? And in our situation in Main Street, we're only 4 blocks long. But to us, we were the world at that time, and it was powerful. But like I said before, I'm a single mom of 2 teenage daughters. I have a service business. My friends up the road, it's a married couple with 2 young boys, and they own and operate the restaurant together, and they own that building. Colleague down the street, she owns her own building. She parks on the street. She lives upstairs, she has her store, she owns the building. So she lost not only her building, her home, her business, and her car. So we are all enter the recovery stage at different times. And if there's some kind of, like I mentioned earlier, some type of hub where rather than getting bombarded with good, well-intentioned emails with information that will help us, because we're all recovering at different stages, we just need to find a place where that information is housed. So, okay, good, now I can think about financial. Okay, now my building is repaired, I need permitting. Now, so there is a lot of local work that I think needs to be done and continue being done. I'm just very grateful and gracious for, our county executive was out there mucking. And because I'm a photographer, I didn't have my good camera because I'm mucking as well. But I take out the phone, he's like, no, Pam, I'm not here for a photo op. This just needs to be done. And that's how Howard County is. It's a big family, and people came from all over the place to help us. But then when we're by ourselves, I go, okay, now what do I do? Oh yeah, what was that email about? And you just don't know because you're kind of frozen. You want to accept this help, and you don't even know what to do next sometimes, except to move one foot in front of the other and engage on what needs to be done to recover. Another thing I think we need to do is think of the mental aspect. And I think now with COVID, since the world has experienced shutdowns, I think the listening and talking about the mental aspect is more normal, if you will. But even leaders who, to give you the 2 floods, we're mucking out the whole time. We're just working our butts off, helping everybody reopen. Then you reopen, and you can't rest yet. You reopen, make everything up, make everything up, make everything up. To find silver linings, when COVID happened and when they said, sorry, Pam, you can't work, I'm like, what? That gave me time to take a breath. And those things I put on the back burner, the website I took down in 16 because it was an old flash site. I'm a photographer with no website. That was a little embarrassing. Thank God for social media. But it gave me time to get those things done that need to be done and do more research. But otherwise, for 3 years, we just ran and ran and ran without a break. Then when you do take that break, you're like, am I okay? I see leaders who it would be great if there was some kind of mental health outlet. Hey, check these resources out. Hey, you can go here. Besides, I mean, obviously we can all pick up the phone and make appointments, but I think that language needs to get out there more and let these people know. I think of the people in the L, with ending with Louisiana, and the people out west with the earthquakes and the tornadoes, and oh my God, those people in Ukraine. Everybody needs help, and it's okay to ask for it and to receive it.
Thank you both. One question that I like to pose, and I think I'll start with go back to you, Pam, because I think you did a little bit of you've brought something with you, so you've brought some show and tell, and would definitely want to have an opportunity to share that with the group here. What I'm hearing is that there isn't enough of and I'm going to sound wonky for a second, so I'm sorry, but we need more of a bi-directional information flow. It needs to be a conversation. It needs to go upwards and downwards, and it can't just be focused on the push. It has to be focused on the back and the forth to find out, asking the question, what do you need? And sometimes, and I think from what you all have shared, the answer is, I don't know, a lot. and sometimes maybe the way through that is to be partnered with folks who've been down that road before. And that can be sometimes just as impactful and just as useful. So, Joel, I know that you've got in your hip pocket a ton of other great ideas, but I want to give Pam a chance to show some of her experience.
Absolutely. All right, Hector, we're going to start the pictures. And to me, and you both had mentioned this, it's about building relationships prior to a disaster. And fortunately, our local, our state, and our senators are down there, not because they have to be, because they eat and they shop down there. So we're very fortunate in that case. So when Governor Hogan called our county executive, what do you need? He's like, I need 40 state troopers to come down here and help guard the area. We didn't want looters. We didn't want, these people have suffered enough. This is a picture that I didn't know who was taking. I'm like, why is this person taking a picture of me? This is the first time in This is the first time I was going into the town after the 16 flood. That's in front of my studio. Sidewalks, over 200 cars landed in the river down the street. It was powerful. You still go down there and you can see the rust on the poles, above your head. We were allowed, the first time in, we were allowed 10 minutes to run in and get what you needed, and by then things were damp. I was lucky. You can see the wrought iron up there. That's my studio porch. You go 4 or 5 steps up to my studio porch. So I did not get the raging waters inside. I sit in, there's a granite hill behind me, so the water comes through, crashing down. In the restroom, there's a drop ceiling. Very minimal damage to me. I was very lucky. We lost a few $1,000s worth of things. So I was lucky in that. Unlucky is you're losing all that business for those few months.
And sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I am. What did your T-shirt say?
Oh. Main Street Matters. Benjamin Moore had done a contest in 2014. They put on a contest. They were going to paint 10 main streets. And so, storyteller I am, I ran around with my phone. tell it to all the business owners in between appointments, tell everybody why our Main Street matters. And so it was a big push for a couple months, and Benjamin Moore repainted the facades of Mid to Lower Main, all the buildings. It was a big deal. It was great. They hired me to take pictures of their things. So that's one of my favorite shirts, Main Street Matters. Good eye. This is how powerful it was. I mean, this is a sidewalk. This was a street. You can see the yellow lines there, the double yellow. That was a street. One of the things when they ask for pictures, I really want to show, to me, again, it's all about the people and the relationships. And like you said, up, down, sideways. It's everybody working together to this is one of my favorite pictures. This is Jenny. She owns a Little Market Cafe. Jenny, her business was closed. She made meat sandwiches, peanut butter jelly sandwiches. She fed the volunteers and brought them drinks. And this is Jenny. I caught her one time walking back up to her car to load, and she was making everything at home because you couldn't get into her restaurant. But this is a great example of Ellicott City and the teamwork and the community feel that we have for one another. This is the first day. This is before getting in the ATV. Just someone came up and grabbed me and said, "Oh, it's going to be okay." We're like, "Yeah, there's no town, but we're going to be okay." So many lemonade stands. Great example of one of the neighborhoods doing lemonade stands. And it's just a moving. We're actually doing a documentary, creating a documentary of what occurred and how we survived. And there are so many stories of neighborhoods helping, and these kids. Some kids painted rocks and sold rocks. Love this. This is an example of, the volunteers leaving at the end of the day, and that's the mess on the side of the road. Again, people working together. Alan Kittleman at the end of the table was our county executive at the time. Larry Hogan next to him. There's people from all over the state coming together and making their plans. One of Alan's first trips down to the street. It kind of says it all, the look on his face. This is Joni's place. We were in there cleaning. Joni now she's 76, 77, year old woman who had already moved her location from the lower end of Maine to more of the mid end. The week before the 2018 flood, there was a flood watch or a flood warning. It was imminent there was going to be a flood. She moved everything out. She has high-end antiques. She moved everything out with a few of her friends, put everything in storage. Flood did not come. She moved everything back on that Thursday, and the flood happened that weekend. Some of the volunteers. This was just a big banner I put in the front of my studio. Though I was not happy to be closed down again, especially I can photograph people on location outside with a very long lens and not come in contact with people. They're like, nope, can't do it. But I still wanted to thank everybody who had to work, all the frontline workers and everybody who had to work. I wanted to thank them, and I wanted to thank the people who were supposed to stay home so we could flatten the curve, hopefully sooner than needed. And this was a picture I took after the recovery of the 2016 flood. Prior to this, there's chain link on that fence. As construction was happening and the street was getting back together, they would narrow the perimeter. There's a chain link to the left of that still, and I just organized a time we could all get together because, again, just publicly thank everybody for all their help, whether it was monetary or physical or donating cleaning goods. I called the county executive's office. I'm like, hey, if Mr. Kittleman can come down at such and such time. I got a phone call from somebody. Hi, Mrs. Long, this is so-and-so. I drew the short straw. I understand you're a very nice woman, but no, you can't do that. I was like, well, it's happening anyway. Do you want to be part of it? He's like, you can't do this. BG&E is still working on the street. I was like, and I have a balcony above my studio. I already had it worked out. I had a friend coming to take the picture. Well, and Mr. Kittleman is in the picture somewhere. He did come down, and we compromised, but the short straw dude, he didn't win that one. So it was just, you always try to think of ways you can thank everybody who's helping you, whether it's an agency or organization or part of the government or friends and family and strangers. Speaking of that, just side note, to thank you for having me here. On one of the email chains, just watching how these people work, everybody who put this thing together, I want those people on the flood mitigation team because they rock. You have a great team. So congratulations to you all.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing just the wonderful visuals and
Sure.
just I just absolutely loved seeing it and one of the takeaways that I get in seeing that and hearing you tell and almost relive some of the experience is that one of the key parts of building resilience, one of the key parts of recovery, it really starts and ends with people, and it starts and ends with having that human connection, recognizing that it's a long trajectory. It's, they say recovery is a marathon, it's not a sprint, although it feels like a marathon of sprints. And so in a few moments, Joel, if you could offer a few of your thoughts and experiences and perspective about how you think we should move forward.
In the United States of America, we have no lack of tools, toolkits, job aids, resources, checklists. U.S. Chamber has this great thing called Resilience in a Box. SBA has a list. We heard from the CISA director. They've got a cyber checklist. FEMA's got checklists. We don't lack information about what to do. We lack engagement. In my class I teach every semester, one of the tasks for all the students, these graduate level students, is to go out and take an existing checklist, toolkit, whatever, and go engage with a small business and a nonprofit and build a business continuity plan with them. And they actually, it's the engagement, and virtually, and a lot of times they intentionally will target underserved communities, disadvantaged communities. And so the students get a lot out of it, the businesses get a lot out of it. It's a small drop in the approach, in the bucket of what needs to be done. But we need to figure out how to get more creative and innovative with engagement. We heard comments today. Small businesses are the engine of the American economy. If that's true, and if economic security really is national security, and you believe that, then we got to get serious about mainstreaming business resilience, small business resilience. I think we should be looking at tax incentives, credits for businesses, insurance, options for discounts. We should even consider eligibility to do business and requirements therein in terms of business continuity planning and preparation. I mentioned earlier, in addition to incentives, looking at the ecosystems that we're developing in cooperation and being deliberate in having this type of conversation with economic development communities. Diversifying supply chains. I think, how can a big business, contribute to this? Look, we learned the problems in supply chains this last couple of years. How do we tap into traditional and non-traditional small businesses as part of our supply chains and plan for that? How do we think about and plan for the pivot required in communities when workforce for a particular sector is disrupted? We see that frequently in hurricane towns when different swaths of communities are wiped out. People can transition, if they're able, to the construction sector maybe for a while, right? And get back to business doing something else. How can we be more deliberate and thoughtful, intentional? If we know what the hazards are, the risks and threats and vulnerabilities are, how can we think in advance? What might be the opportunity? Let's pull some Machiavelli into this. Where's the opportunity and chaos there that we can leverage and be deliberate about in our planning, in our economic development planning, in our whole community, disaster management, emergency management planning, whatever it is, to do that? I think regional hubs, leveraging, leaning into regional hubs and ecosystems is a key part of it. And like I said earlier, focus less on, we do a lot of good work on the individual business assistance level, but more on community-based solutions and providing local capacity building to the business and industry communities.
Thank you both. One of the things that we are desperate to want to do at the SBA is to respond to the call and the messages that and the stories you all have shared. And so this is the call to action to all of you. You all are the experts too. We're open for not just for business but for partnership. We can't do it alone, and it is insufficient to just put something on a website. It needs to be personal. It needs to be engaged. And so let's get this moving. Let's get this started. And please join me in thanking the panel.